Brilliant ideas, powered by Hyundai Motor.
Kader Attia is one of the most surprising and provocative artists in the world today. His socially and politically charged work employs a wide range of mediums to address global issues surrounding immigration, colonization and cultural identity.
He's a global citizen, and I think his work reflects the coming together of the Occidental and the Oriental.
He's very interested in analogical thinking. He allows the viewer to look at two things and to create a relationship between them.
I think Kader Attia's work has a lot to do with engaging in a global dialogue.
For him, I would say art is a means to express social, political, cultural questions, and they are never just artistic questions.
He's someone who struggles. He pushes himself to actually capture what he feels is wrong.
This moment in which I developed interest in art, I think, was when I thought it might be possible to change the world. I think art has this ability. And that's why most of my artworks are very interested in this notion of living together. Politics.
Politics underpins most of Kader Attia's work, and his installation, Caspar, perfectly demonstrates the way he playfully invites his audience to consider issues of dominance and exploitation.
In North African cities, the slums are called Caspar. It's like very provisional cities made of material found in the street.
He uses fragments of these rooftops and brings them into the gallery. That's a way of bringing the city into the museum space.
It's a huge, semi-flat expanse of corrugated iron and old tires and bits of wood.
It would be easy to make a critical work about living conditions of those people, but Kader somehow turns it around and gives it beauty.
When you see people in their stiletto heels or their big clumpy trainers sort of trying to keep their balance as they go across the roofs, one of the very clear things that you're doing, and we're lost, I must say, on quite a large proportion of the visitors, is that you're treading on the heads of the poor.
Born in France to Algerian immigrants, Kader grew up in both Algiers and a largely North African community on the outskirts of Paris. This duality would profoundly influence his artistic outlook.
This has helped me become very sensitive to issues or people in between spaces, physical, geographical, or intellectual.
After studying philosophy and graphic design in Paris and Barcelona, Kader spent 2 years in the Congo to complete his French national service. It was an experience that would further shape his worldview.
From this, I started to be very interested by the problem of colonization. This notion of domination between one order of thing to another one caught my attention when I was living in Congo.
Colonization would become an important theme in Kader's later work. But on his return to Paris, he stumbled on a far more personal subject for his first major project.
I was walking in the street of Paris. I heard two men talking each other in Arabic, but talking like women. And so I turned myself and I saw two transgenders. I was like, wow, those are weird people and they are very brave. They were refugees from Algeria in a time where Algeria was almost taken over by the Islamists. So to be a man dressed as a woman was not only dangerous, I mean, they were really killed.
Gaining their confidence, Kader was introduced to a whole community of transgender North Africans and made them the subject of a photographic series that he exhibited as a slideshow in his home.
It was less a documentary about this life than a making visible of dignity, friendship, solidarity among those people.
They're somehow not quite accepted in any society, and they live in often quite impoverished circumstances, but they themselves are always glamorous. And he, I think, loved the way that they'd reinvented themselves against the odds.
There's a certain beauty in those that are wounded and really finding themselves up against implacable strength.
They were like a sort of incarnation that you can be transgressive politically without being in politics.
The work was a success and was selected for the Venice Biennale in 2003, catapulting Kader into the heart of the art world.
In the Venice Biennale, it was very well received. And I was very surprised because it was not art for me. It was just this, the necessity of giving them a voice and giving them a visibility. I never thought this could interest a sort of artistic audience.
After the break, Kader goes international with a series of installations exploring themes of colonization, immigration and repair. Drawing on his connections with North Africa, French-Algerian artist Kader Attia shifted his gaze from the personal lives of immigrant communities in France and began to explore broader issues surrounding colonization, immigration and cultural identity through a series of thought-provoking film and installation work.
Oil and sugar are part of our global economy, and they have been so much involved in the unequal systems, creating poverty, creating domination, repression, colonization. What defined the modern relation with slavery is this transformation of a human person into a goods, into sugar. Oil is much more problematic, and oil is definitely linked to colonization. So you have this sugar that is becoming black, and then this incredible moment of, oh my God, this is it. It starts to collapse.
Kader uses his colonial experience as a kind of starting point for feelings of exclusion or equality in every way.
In his first major installation work, Kader decided to tackle issues of exclusion head-on. Set on a beach in the Canary Islands, Holy Land was a reaction to the plight of refugees arriving by sea from Africa.
I wanted to do something that would work in the reality as an ethical project. I thought that when the refugees come from the sea, they need to see signs which indicate that the earth is in that direction, you know? So I decided to set up on the beach 100 mirrors facing the sea. So coming from the sea, you would have seen a line of glittering light as a signal of there is something here. The ocean on that part of the globe, it's a cemetery. That is the reason that I choose shapes which looks like graves.
It's really beautiful because on the one hand it's a very manifest political meaning because you look into them but you don't see yourself. You see the reflected landscape and light in the mirrors themselves.
We think that what we look at in the mirror is real, but it's not. When people reach the beach, they expect something, but what they will find also in the West is not what they have dreamed about. And that's why I call this installation Holy Land, because for them it's a kind of Holy Land. But the reality, we know it when we live in this side of the border. It's not the Holy Land.
He's someone who struggles. He pushes himself to actually capture what he feels is wrong. This is really at the heart of the work because the work is about healing.
Sidestepping overtly political issues, Kader's installation Ghost takes the culturally charged image of prayer in the Islamic world as a means to explore universal themes of existence and mortality.
ghost is definitely a sort of incarnation of the fact that we come from nothing and we go to nothing. The confrontation that you have with this work scares you a little bit because it represents death.
You approach this installation from the back, and only when you see the figures from the front, you see it's not solid metal sculptures, it's only aluminium foil, and it's very beautiful, but it's also scary at the same time because the figure has no face.
I started to do the first ghost wrapping my mother with aluminium foil because I was looking at her praying. After I cast the bodies, I discovered that it was extremely fascinating to see that the void inside the sculpture was even more important than the skin.
Whatever material he uses, it is always trying to mirror or to find an expression for the topic he tackles. So there's a very close connection between topic and material.
The fact that I kept this work fragile is very important. It is an ephemeral work.
In Kader, Kader would continue his use of ephemeral materials, but in a more political context. The work juxtaposes a model of the ancient North African city of Kader, made out of couscous, with an image of Le Corbusier, the godfather of modern Western architecture.
Kader is a city in Algeria that has been influencing modernist architecture through the eye of Le Corbusier, who was, let's say, the first architect to really get amazed by this incredible 11th century architecture made of clay. I think you have here definitely what I would call the sort of colonization of the knowledge. On one hand, you have emerging new architecture in the West that are part of a Western superiority, if not supremacy, you know. But the legacy of this is tradition, and not even Western tradition.
Corbusier, like his modernist pals, didn't believe really in retaining an existing culture. They wanted a tabula rasa, and they tended to destroy what was there. Kader Attia repairs that. He's again finding a way of creating a rapprochement between this idea of modernity, erasing everything that went before it, and bringing back the life and the culture of what has always been there.
I used couscous, it's the main dish of North African population since 3,000 years, as a cynical dish or dinner in which posthumously I'm inviting Le Corbusier and another architect to illustrate this sort of amnesia we are living in. This has to be repaired.
Kader's interest in repairing the relationship between Western and non-Western culture would reach a new level of analysis in a powerful and disturbing work he presented at the Documenta 13 exhibition in Germany.
The work was called Repair, from Occident to Extra-Occidental Cultures. He had a system of shelves where he put different things like sculptures, found objects, books, and many other things to kind of counter African and European cultural traditions and mix them together.
What he did was to juxtapose photographs and actual busts of veterans of the First World War who'd had the most crude plastic surgery. And these were shown alongside African heads, where scarification, the extension of lower lips or earlobes, is a cultural ritual, it's a kind of fashion.
There was also a very impressive slide projection with two slides next to each other. There was faces of soldiers from the First World War, for example. There was broken cultural artifacts from Africa.
So he's interested in finding the continuities between these things, bringing them together and creating kind of suture between them.
He takes repair as a philosophical concept, but also as a social concept.
It was very important for me to involve the audience slowly into this complexity of the repair by very simple analogies. So analogies between an injured faces and a broken object. At the beginning, the repair of the body was similar to repair of any items. But then you look at the images and you discover that at the end of the war, the repair of the faces was almost perfect. In the West, when we break something, we change it. And if we do not change it, we repair it and we remove the injury. It has to disappear. In traditional society, repairing means to give to the object a new life, a new form, but still keeping the trace of the injury like a sign of the time and the history of the object.
Every time a person repairs an object, they add to its history. It sort of shakes up our assumptions that objects last only a brief period of time and that we have to go and consume more.
After the break, we visit Kader in his studio in Berlin and travel to Paris to drop in on his latest community project. French-Algerian artist Kader Attia is currently based in Berlin, where his Bookline studio serves as a research centre for many of his projects.
We are here in my studio, and it's not a big studio. This place is not a brain. I hope my brain is not that messy, but it is actually a sort of a platform for work and thinking and feeding my own creative process. Goes from the arts, modern art, the whole top is about surgery, then colonization, architecture, definitely. I have many objects here, not only books, obviously, I have some masks. It represents this sort of brain stroke from which you can wake up with your mouth like this and your nose like this. And I think this is extremely interesting because we're either representing the illness, so that probably invited in some ritual to cool down the bad spirit of this illness, and so that it won't attack the village. Or it can be a celebration of a sort of rarity. Beauty basically means rarity, but those people were rare, so why we consider them as monsters?
In 2016, Kader Attia was awarded the Prix Marcel Duchamp, one of France's most prestigious art prizes, for a work dealing with notions of repair, entitled Reflecting Memory.
The exhibition begins with a piece of matlout bread baked by his mother, cut in half and fixed to the wall. And this bread is a symbolic entrance into a series of works that continue with a film of 45 minutes called Reflecting Memory.
It started with a very physical matter, what we call the phantom limb. The fact that some people who have lost a leg or an arm, they still feel this limb. Some of them wake up during the night and they feel, oh, it's back, and sadly not.
When you watch the film, you realize that what you think is a man or a woman standing there with their complete body is effectively the mirror reflection of somebody who has lost a leg.
They look at themselves whole, reflected in a mirror, doubling their leg or their arm, and then the mirror is taken away and the subconscious recognizes for the first time the loss of the limb.
It's a method that is used to heal the problem and the pain of the phantom limb. So he's interested in the haunting that remains within our consciousness.
What is really compelling about this film is that rather than taking one medical fact or psychological state, he moves from these sufferers, if you like, to music, to the Holocaust, to the psychiatrists, and again he finds ways of dissolving boundaries and bringing all these different thoughts and aspects of contemporary culture together.
It became clear that there was a metaphor between the individual amputated body and the social group. What has happened for the descendants of the Holocaust, for instance? This generation of people who have lived with the disappearance of their grandparents or parents, it remained as a traumatic ghost, a phantom limb haunting them. As long as you deny this dispossession process, could it be cultural or physical, you get confronted to repair. What I'm showing here is the phantom limb of cultural complexes.
The centerpiece of the work, after you've seen the film, is 20 plinths with sculptures, which in the first instance you think belong to so-called tribal art. But when you look at them more carefully, you see immediately that they are the packaging of electronic equipment. It's that immediate flash, the fact that you can't stop yourself from thinking that you're looking at African masks when you're actually looking at something as banal as a piece of packaging. It evokes the phantom limb within the history of art.
Recently, Kader has taken his call for repair out of the gallery and into the world by opening a new space for art and discussion in the multi-ethnic neighbourhood of Gare du Nord in Paris. Consisting of a cafe, bookstore, exhibition space and conference centre, La Colonie aims to unite thinkers, artists, activists and members of the public to help mend many of the problems facing the modern world.
The colony is not only criticizing the colonial history, it's actually criticizing the coloniality of now, the colonization of classes, the colonization of genders, the domination of one part of population on the other.
If you look at the colony's logo, you'll see it's crossed out. So it isn't a colony in that sense, it's an anti-colony as well.
It's interesting that it happens in Paris because, of course, the history of artist-run spaces began in Paris.
It's a space for his neighbourhood, for those kids who had nothing. And I think that as a gesture is something which I find very powerful and moving, that he wants to share the success that he's had recently and actually bring other people into it.
Kader's work is doing something that religion might have done to people in earlier ages. It kind of touches you on a level that you cannot really grasp. It shows you why art is important.
Whatever subject he handles, he does it because he's interested in the relationship between injury and repair. And this makes his work into a process of remediation.
Kader Attia is an artist who encompasses activism, but without didacticism. He shows the way that cultures can absorb pain, trauma, destruction, and yet still be creative.
I think he's an artist very much concerned with moral thought, and that's what makes him important for me. And that is something that informs all of his work. And I wish there were more artists like that.
As an artist, I could spend my life doing aesthetics and decorating the minds. But I think there is a sort of moment now of emergency in terms of the world we are living in now and how it can be corrected, how it can be repaired for a better future. I want to take care of that.
Brilliant ideas, powered by Hyundai Motor.